Hey everybody, David here. It's another Thursday. You guys did so amazing last week. Thank you so much for doing all those wonderful, wonderful soft edges. And so this week we're going to do soft edges again. And a little practice, but I am amazed at how well you guys did. A really nice job. And I'm glad you actually did it too, because it really is important that you try to do the soft edges. Tonight's will be the same, kind of like almost a recap of what we did last week. Not exactly, but kind of like that way. And we're also going to tonight. We're going to be doing a little bit of adding a little bit of black color to our colors and white, black and white. We're going to put into our color scheme. And like I know a lot of the traditionalists won't do it, but give it a shot. Just give it a shot. Give it a try. Shy. All right. And so tonight we for our beer. I finally went to a place. I found a new place, and so tonight I've got a Noon Whistle Cosmo Pale Ale. This is from Lombard, Illinois, called the Noon Whistle Brewery. So we're gonna try this, and it's supposed to be a little bit citrus pale ale. So we'll see how this tastes. I finally got some regular beer, so I found a place not too far from where I teach, and I just went and got about 6 new cans that are just all different kinds of things. Not bad, not bad. A little bit bitter for me, but I'm going to give it a 9.5. So, cheers everybody. Here's to a 9.5 Pale Ale. Made in Lombard, Noon Whistle Brewery. Not bad. I should not get too many IPAs because they are a little bit more bitter, and I'm not that much of a bitter, but it is a little bit lemony, so that's not too bad. All right, so today we are going to do a beach scene with a pier on it and a sunset, and we're going to do the background all soft edge like we did last week, and when we do our foreground, we're going to be using black, and when we use our yellows, I'm going to put a little bit of white into it just to tone down the yellow, like I talked to in my newsletter this last week. And look who's all here. Thanks again for coming. We got Ginger, Sue, Dawn, Maura, Evelyn, Dave, and Tina so far. And thanks for stopping by every Thursday. And thanks also, I just noticed that a couple of people already thumbs up to the people before we even started. I'm like, boy, you know it's going to be good already? You have to give it 2 thumbs up before you even started. All right, and hey, Marianne. And so let's go right away to our website. I did change a little bit of the website. I'm still not done with it. We still got a bunch of stuff to do on it, but you notice I do have now in the front right what we're painting, and the link right to the website here on YouTube when we do the paint-alongs, and I have my daily painting that I put up there, and so that's all new, kind of differently put there, and so I've been working on it a little bit. All right, supplies are like as always our Holbein watercolors, our brushes from Holbein, which are Becker brushes, which you can get on my website, and Stonehenge paper. We're using Stonehenge, and people had asked me, do you have to use Stonehenge to get the effects that I get? No, I mean, you can use any paper you want. Don't use cheap paper, though, and don't use cheap products. Don't use like the stuff you can get at Walmart. Well, actually, their paper is like that you have in a ring and a binder. Those are not things that I want to get, There's okay brushes, like you can get brushes like at Hobby Lobby that are pretty decent and stuff, but just don't get student grade stuff. It really is tough to do all this stuff if you're getting student grade stuff. All right, value study. Here we go. So look at the background. Isn't that neat? It's turn it black and white like we always do. We turn our images black and white. Why? To figure out our value pattern. And I'm not going to make the clouds as dark as you see here. I know a lot of these clouds right here, they're almost black in this image. I'm not going to make them quite this dark. I know it kind of looks more dramatic, but I don't want this to be as dramatic as this. And I'm going to not put as many lines that go straight across here, because I did that, and it's not so great, excuse me, putting lines straight across the image like this. And so I'm going to make it a little bit simpler and not have the same type of thing. Look at how this cloud goes right to the edges. It's almost like it's pointing and it's right in here. It's almost like a shape that's within this little area right where this tree goes down. And those are called tangents. And same thing with this one. Look at it. It's a dark that goes right and points to this tree. We don't need that. We're going to bring it right through there. And this big blob right here of dark, it's again right in the center here. It's not running off the page here. This is so you got 4 different shapes right here that are not great composition look. Not great look for the composition. You can make it darker there, and you don't have to make it especially a dark cloud. You can keep it just simple and let the watercolor do its thing. I do want to do the sun right in here, and so this will be scattered. What do you call it? Optical scatter, where we'll put that orange in there, and so we'll make that look really cool. And I like the light shining into the water here. That's kind of neat. I'll do that. It is right smack in the middle of the painting, but I think it's offset by having this big thing here and about having it appear on this side. So it's okay. And then you're going to sign it over here so we have all good balance. And what is going to be our darks and our lights? Our darks will be this whole pier and the trees and the beach in the front. And the sky I'm going to consider my light. Even though there is some darks in here, I don't want to make it that dark. And I'll show you what I had done, and it's kind of made me realize that this is like what it was. All right, and so let me go to our tabletop, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So here's what I had done this afternoon, and you can see I took away kind of the long lines that go all the way across. Again, having long lines stare like a ladder is not the greatest composition. And but what I did do though is I stopped things right at the tree, and I actually wiped this 2 things out. I tried to wipe them out a little bit because I did have lines in there, but afterwards I took it out. So that's not what I'm not going to do this time. and as you notice, I'm having a little bit more color here, so I don't have to go as dark. And it is darker on top as it goes back, but the whole sky, depending on how light you want the sun to look though, if you want to do make everything a little slightly darker, but you don't have to have like a really dark right here, like right where that is at. You can just make the whole thing a little bit darker, have things falling down a little bit and wispy. And so that's what we did last week, right? With the background, we kept everything really wet into wet, and so that's what we're going to do here. And we're going to go, I'm going to go right up to the horizon line, and we'll start right there. All right, so we're going to do the background wet into wet. And you know what to do for wet and wet, right? I mean, you've done it before now. Last week, you guys did a great job. And I like some of you who have taken your soft wet into wet learnings. That's a word. Your teachings, and you put them into other paintings. You know, not besides what you did last week. You took other paintings, and you had done a really nice job of doing a wet background. And that's the reason I'm teaching you it, is so that it's not just for that painting, not just for this painting, it's for every painting. If you want to have soft edges, you need to wet the whole thing and go wet into wet. And that's one way of making things look like they're in the background. And so I'm going to wet this whole background evenly again. Now if I want to keep the light really light, the sunlight right here in the middle, remember what I had to do, stay away from that area. Don't touch it. Stay away from that area. And I will go like last week, I will go again from light to dark. And again, anybody who's new here, I don't see anybody new at the moment, but if you are new and you're just listening and you're too afraid to talk, please ask questions. These guys all know what they're doing. Everybody knows what they're doing now, so they don't ask many questions. So if you're new, please don't hesitate to ask questions. And you do that by asking them in the chat bar. And I will answer them very much if I'm looking up. All right? So let's start out with a little bit of yellow. And like I said, with my yellow, I like to put a little white in there because yellow by itself is really vibrant, too vibrant for me sometimes. And so I put a little white into it, and that tones it down to make it a little bit more of a pastel, more of a Naples yellow. I kind of make my own yellows. And I'm going right to the line, horizon line, which I actually took a ruler this time because my one I did this afternoon, I didn't do a good job of making it look like it's on a hill. So, and then I'm going to take it a little bit more red, orange down to the horizon line. I'm going to try to keep it a little bit darker than I had done this afternoon because I think I just got to, again, the hardest problem for all of us is to keep things darker than they are when you look at them. Like right now, this looks perfect, right? Well, if that looks perfect, then it's wrong because it's going to dry 20% lighter. So you got to make it look wrong to make it look right. You have to make it 20% darker, making it look wrong so that when it dries, it's 20% lighter, and then you're all good to go. And again, what did we do? We used our our mister to keep it wet, because you're going to keep it wet still. You're going to try to keep it wet like we did last week. Wet in the wet. A little bit of white, a little bit of white and yellow. I use permanent yellow light or Naples yellow I use sometimes. Yellows I find to be so close that I don't really, whatever color you use, it's going to be fine. There's more of a golden kind of yellow, but if you're like a lime yellow, and those are pretty yellow. Like a lemon yellow, those are very, very bright, super, super bright. And so the first thing I'm going to do is not do any of the darks in here. I'm just doing the light parts of the background sky, keeping it wet. And you can really do that by just going really light. You don't have to go dark right away, but you have to make sure that you keep it nice and wet. I'm keeping away from this spot because I'm going to keep that white. And then as this is still wet, I may have to spray it a little bit, just one time. So all I got to do is spray one time. You don't have to go back and forth and make it really a lot. Just enough to keep it a little bit wet. And I'm going to take my blue, maybe a little bit of violet in there, and just do the light parts of that. And if I get a little bit of green, that's fine, because there is a little green in the sky. It happens when the blue and the yellow come together. And I'm just going across this. Again, getting my light areas and making them 20% darker than I think they should be, so that you get the perfect value when it's dry. A little bit darker. And again, this is not the darks yet. This is the lights. I'm going in there with the lights. But one thing about doing the lights first is that I do have to get them dark on the first wash when I'm doing the sky, because I want soft edges. But as the process of getting the darks, you don't want to put them in right away. You want to put them in after you get your lights in there. Like put in your little lights and get those all in there. And then start going back and getting your dark. And again, this is not quite dark enough. I'm going to go in there and just keep on working my lights until I get them to where I want them. And keep on working, leaving this spot nice and light. And I'm not going to go to exactly what this image is. I find that to be a little bit too wild and crazy a sky. I just want it to be not quite as vibrant as that, or not quite as all over the place. And I don't want levels like of lines going across. I think that flattens it a little bit. And you notice I'm going right through the trees and this down here, because that's going to be darker on top of that. So I'm going to put little lines in here, like maybe a little. Now I'll use my round brush. I'm going to use my round brush to get more of my deeper darks. And I will get dark. I'm going to try to get dark with them and use a lot of pigment. You notice how much pigment you had to use last week. I hope you noticed that, because you have to. One thing about when you're working like that, you do need a lot of pigment. You do need a lot of pigment when you're working wet into wet, and you want to get a soft edge and control it. You need a lot of pigment. It's just one of those things that you have to do. And I really should go with my light color darks first. Like get those light color darks in there first, and go through here. Do some lines, just let it go through. When you talk about using fresh paint, are you meaning it's right out of the tube unless it's Holbein? Yes, Sue, that's a great thing. Yes, when you're using fresh paint, it has to be able to pick up enough medium or pigment so that you're using it to stop the water from running all over the place. So yes, if you don't use a like a Holbein stays fresh, and it stays fresh a long time, and it instantly rejuvenates. But if you don't use a Holbein and you have big hard clumps in there, you're not going to get enough pigment in your brush to make anything look nice, and you won't be able to control your pigment. Your pigment will be uncontrollable because you're using more water than pigment, and pigment is harder than to kind of stop from just running in that water and getting your nice soft edges. So what I'm doing here now is I'm going to do some of these clouds. And if you have it real wet, and some people notice they were using too much water, but sometimes if you use too much water and you lift it up a little bit, you can have it nice go downwards a little bit. Like you can have it run down and give you those nice watermarks that are so wonderful. Where it kind of just goes down and gives you little fingers, which I got in my one this afternoon. So that's fine. You notice how I'm trying to stay away from this area right here. That's where the sun is supposed to be. And I'm not doing such a good job. And so, let me put a little bit. I know there's not any red in this here, but I'm going to put a little bit more warmth right through here, just so that it feels like the sun is going to be right there. And as I dip into a lot of different colors, I just dip into my purple here, dip into Prussian blue, I dip into this lilac and lavender, and then I put a little bit of water in here. Oh, this is starting to get too dry. Ooh, almost missed it. If it starts getting too dry and I don't see a sheen, boy, you're in big trouble. You're in big trouble because then you can't go back in. And so you just gotta watch it. Get yourself a mister, not a sprayer. Sprayer sprays it too much. A mister gives you a nice mist, and it goes right over it, and it gives you a little bit more time. Now this area it's almost too dry too. Though I'm not going to probably go back into that area. And you notice I just go once across. I've seen people in class going more than, and they're just getting it way too wet. Just enough so you can get back in there. Just enough so it's still floating. Use a little lilac here. Going to kind of put that in there. Going to go across. You have a lot of time to do this, and it's all about the sky. I mean, the sky's got to look beautiful, so spend time on it. And just really make it to what you want it to be. Work it and get these nice dark. I'm going to put a nice dark cloud in here. And like I said, I'm not going to make it quite as dark as in the photograph. You do what you want. You can make it any value you want, as long as it's not as dark as the darks in the front, because you want to keep that for the center of interest in this area right here. Janine asked if I know where this pier is at. No, I do not. I don't know. It didn't say in the Unsplash website when I took it off of there where this is at. You maybe can take the picture and then put it into Google Images, and sometimes you can find that out like that. You just put the whole file into Google Images, and sometimes it'll tell you because it'll pick it up. It'll know where it is at, and then it'll just give you other shots of that same pier. So do that, and you can maybe find out where this pier is actually at if you drag it into Google Images. So I think this sky is a little bit nicer. I think I have a little bit more, I don't have so much wildness to it, and it's a little bit darker, though it's not dry yet, so I shouldn't say that because maybe it's going to get a lot lighter than this. So maybe I should darken it a little bit more here in some spots. One spray, boom, keeping it wet, keeping it nice and pliable. And if you have to learn how to spray it, take some time. Take some time and go in there and spray it with a lot, spray it with a little bit, just to see what's best for you, like how much you spray it for the way you paint. And maybe less or more than what I do. You never know, because it's all about the paints you use, the paper you use. Some papers soak up more than others. Now what I'm going to do is, I missed this, is that right through here, I'm going to take out some paint. See right here, I'm just going to take my brush, I'm going to rinse it off on my towel, and I'm going to pull out some of this light area here. Why? Because I want the sun to really shine right here. I want it to look like the sun is really shining in the back, and it's just kind of making this really light through there. And you can just, see how I wipe off on my towel, and I just absorb some of the pigment. And then I like to take water and put it back in there, because I want to keep it evenly wet so that I don't get watermarks. And actually, it takes out even more of the paints. There we go. A little bit more right here. So then the sun's going to look like it's really blasting right through the middle here. All right, I think that's pretty good for a sky. So let's go right into the water. The water's going to be the same color as that, but I kept it dry. Why? Because I want to do a little bit of dry brushing in this. A lot of times you can see that when artists, and it's pretty much, if you look at the colors, it's reflecting the darks in the sky. You can start out with a little bit of the orange too, but pretty much it's reflecting the dark in the sky, and because it's a deep, as you go back, it goes from a dark to a light. And light, very much light right here, where the sun is hitting right there. And look at it, I put right where my sun was supposed to be, I put there. So I'm going to put a thing of water there and just kind of try to get that back. That's where the sun is supposed to be, and I'm supposed to get pure paper. That's the lightest of the paper, and that's where you want to have the sun. So I'm just going to take that out of there. All right, so with the water, I'm not going to wet it first. Here's my flat brush. I'm going to take the color that I'm going to use right through here. I'm going to first go with maybe a little bit of this orangeness. And what I'm going to do is take a dry brush. My brush is wet with pigment, but what I do is I write in here, before that I kind of just wisp it across the top, getting the surface, picking up the surface of the paper. So it feels a little rough, and I'm picking up a little bit of the paper. And you notice how I don't care about this pier? The piers can be dark, so why would you ever worry about this pier? Just go right over it, do the water like it's not there yet. Nobody built it yet. And so you're just going to go in here, and I'm going to keep it light, but I'm going to keep it textury, so like a dry brush. Leave a little bit of the white. I'm going to take it all the way down here, right through the pier, because if you see through the pier, underneath the pillars, you're going to see a little bit of that too. So I'm just almost dry brushing it. And now I'm wetting it. Now I'm going to wet it across, and then just put my regular paint. Then I'll go through the regular stuff I would have done. So then I go across, and then it's wet in the wet. Make a nice harder edge. I don't care about a hard edge, but make sure this edge is really straight. There's no tsunami coming in. There's no big hills back there. Go right through the building. And see how it's a little bit darker. And I'm not worried about the waves yet. I'm just getting it dark in there. As I come forward, I'm wetting as I go along. And so I'm wetting as I go along. See, I'm just going to wet it. I don't need anything to be white down here, so I know I can just go over everything. Make it a little bit more blue. Ultramarine blue here a little bit, and pick up that blue right there, which is purple and blue. So I'm just going to put that in there. And this is kind of my middle tone and light together as one, because I'm doing a big area, and I can't do just the light because... or just the light, because I want to get some medium in there right away, so I don't have to go back into it later. I like to get this done right away and make it look fresh, because that's the best way to do this, is make things look fresh by putting in one wash. I know a lot of times we like to put 2 or 3 washes in, but if you can get things done by the first and second wash, that's better. Matter of fact, if you can get everything done by one wash, that's the best. So now we're going to take a little bit of orange down here. My bigger brush, because I like to cover a bigger area. So look at that, go right through. And again, pretend like this pier, these trees are not here. They're not here yet. They're not even grown. They're not even built yet. That comes later. Manhattan Beach, Los Angeles. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for looking it up. And so the beach now, we're going to do a little bit of like purple and orange together. And the beach is actually darker than the water, but first I want to get some color in there, and I can get the darker part later. And so I'm just going to go in here and get like a main color, and then try to do the same color that I have over here into the background. Again, nice and straight across here. When I get to a part that's dry already here, I'm just going to wet it and go with the color I had right there and try to re-wet it. And already we're getting the look, right, of the sun coming through here. And it's dappled on the water. There's sparkles on the water, so just keep that sparkly. And wet all this. And if you drew it too light, you may lose some of your drawing. If you do, which a couple people have done, they drew it up and they drew it up too light. Because when you're putting big washes across things, sometimes it just erases it, right? It kind of, depending also if you used graphite paper, it will sometimes just go away. Like it'll just bleed in and act like pigment, and the whole line will go away. If that happens to you, please redraw it. You know, don't think that, okay, yeah, no, I know where it was. Because drawing is number one, and if you don't have it looking good in the drawing, it's not going to look good. So go ahead and redraw it when it's dry, or put your transfer paper or your graphite paper back over it when it's dry, and then retrace it. Whatever you have to do to make that drawing good again. That's something you have to have good. You cannot fake good drawing. The only thing you can do, if you don't know what an area is like, you can fake it by making it blurry, like we learned how to do soft edges. Like this area in here, I may just do a lot of blurriness into it, make it dark and blurry, and that's meaning soft edges, and that's okay. Here I'm making this dark, again, dark water over here until you get over to the middle. That's when I switch over to a little bit of orange through here. Let that bleed in. This down here will be really dark, but I have to wait for that to dry. And again, you see how I'm going through things? I'm not going around. Why? Because it makes your wash look so much better. That's why we would use masking fluid if we needed to have an area that's light, like these. If these trees were had to be white, let's say instead of black, then I would have to actually put masking fluid on there because I still want the sky to look really, really beautiful going across there. I couldn't stop at a spot and then go on the other side and still make it look great. The easiest washes are the big broad one, right? And so that's why we do that. That's why we paint right through the tree. We know it's going to be darker later, so we don't have to worry about that. So right now I'm just kind of waiting because I need it to dry. And so ask some questions here. Let's see, did I miss any? Anne says, thanks for sharing Bonnie Steinberg's demo. Yeah, that was I'm the president of the Lakes Region Watercolor Guild, and that was one of our artists that gives a monthly demonstration. And she was great. And she comes from Toronto, Canada. And she does want to do a workshop by us. We do workshops twice a year in the spring and the fall. Cheers, everybody. Cheers. I'm waiting for this to dry. So ask a question, will you? Here, while this is drying, I will show you how I can put a little bit. This is still wet enough where I can pull out. I'm going to pull out a little bit of the wave. Just going to pull out a little bit here, just a little bit, just to kind of give it a little bit of a looking of waves. And I can even put a little bit darker part in there. It'll be maybe a little bit of a watermark, but hey, when you're doing something like this where the watermark looks like a wave, then why not? You know, it's like I'm not going to do it really to the fullest yet, but let's see. So I'm going to take a little bit of dark, I'm just going to put it in there while it's still a little damp. And since it's damp, it'll get a little bit of a watermark. But like I said, it's a wave, and so a watermark in a wave doesn't look as bad as if it's something that you don't want to watermark in, like when you drop a piece of water there. This is like a line watermark because I'm putting a little bit more water than is down there, so it's going to spread out a little bit, but give me kind of a watermark. But I think it feels a little bit like a wave, so that's going to be kind of cool. So I don't mind that. Practice with your paper being wet and put a lot of pigment on there. See what you can add and when you can add it. Like, can you add it when it's almost dry? What happens if it's almost dry? Because there's different effects you can get at different times. Bjorn Bernstrom, he loves those watermarks. He does watermarks. He just did a thing in glaciers, and man, it looks great with the watermarks. The watermarks look like part of the glacier and stuff. And in the sky, he does it. So it's like, if you can get a watermark to help you out, that's great. Do it. For me, I'm just waiting for things to dry. All right, so this is pretty much all our lights. All our lights are done, and all our big mediums are almost pretty done too. So we're basically at our dark stage. The only thing that is a bigger dark is going to be the beach in front here. But I still can't do that because this is still a little too wet. So I'm going to go right into my dark details because that's the only thing that's left. And when you think about it, this whole image is all about the sky and the water being big areas. And then all this little stuff like the trees, the pier, the little house on the pier, that's all detail. And so just spend your time now starting with the middle tones of the pier. So the big middle tones, and what would that be? That would be the house back there. Just going to put a little bit of color in there. And this is middle tone. This is not the darkest dark. I'm just putting color. I'm putting a little orange on this side of the building since it's going to be a little bit lighter. And then I'm going to take the walkway of the pier is actually lit up. And so there'll be some nice colors in there, right? There's going to be a little bit of orange coming in there. So I'm going to do that. That's a big area of medium. Big area of medium and darks. This is my always the second thing you do. So I'm just going to put that in there really quickly. Because then on top of that will come the darkest darks, which is the dark details. And that's always the final stage. So you notice how I always do the same thing every single week? It's not that because of what you're painting, it's just the way I paint. That's the way I teach, is that you do those 3 different stages, and it should all be the same every week. As it is sort of a silhouette, could you draw your picture with like a real fine Sharpie pen first? Where you're going to paint black so you don't lose your lines? Yeah, you could do that, Tina. Yeah, you could pretty much do anything because everything in front. I always tell students too. This is a great sunsets are great for students because everything in the background is light, everything in the front is dark, and saying dark with sunsets, it actually is dark. It's black because it's a silhouette shape. Now, like what I'm doing right now, though, having this color in there, that you have to watch out for because you still have to put that in there because you don't want to just solid black. Though there are people who make it look like it's solid silhouette, and that's fine too. I like to have a little bit of color though in the black and a little bit of color in the middle tones of the silhouette, so that it doesn't look so cut out like a black stencil that was put on there. Because there are going to be parts in here that are going to be a little bit colorful, and actually when I put my blacks in, I'm going to use ivory black and peach black. And when I put them in, I mix color into them. Especially, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out right here. I'm going to start with the part of the tree that is going to be hitting against the light. And so that's going to be solid orange and yellow. So I'm basically going in here first with yellow and orange. And I will show you my little trick when you're doing palm trees. Because all palm trees have a stem or a branch that goes out to their fronds. And so what I like to do is just start out with those branches in the trunk of the tree. And I'm doing this all yellow and orange right here because that's going to be where the sun is and it's bleaching it out. It's basically optical scatter that's really bleaching out this area and making it look really warm because of the sun hitting the edges. Inside there you can make it a little bit darker. Right away you can go really dark. But right in this spot, right in here, I'm going to try to do a lot of things with the orange and yellow. And then I'll go right to a really dark black and green, because they are probably green, right? But since they are silhouette, I can almost make them solid black too, without any green. It all depends on what you want to do and what colors you have elsewhere. So here now is a little green and black and blue. And you notice these things, most of the people make these fronds way too big. They're very, very small fronds. And so do more of the big area that's dark than the little fronds. Those you want to kind of keep really, really small. Really, really small. Because they're really small, a lot smaller than you think. Because there's, thousands of little fronds on this tree. And when you're just doing one or two, that doesn't make it look like the frond of a tree. So here, let me just show you on a piece of paper. Hold on 1 second. I'll find a sheet of paper here. Oh, 1 second here. So with a sheet of paper, when you do these fronds or these palm leaves, there's always a stem, and depending on what the stem is, what kind of palm it is, you have the ones that kind of go like this that are almost like they're wide and they go all the way around like this. They start small here and they go really wide and they're almost like a big round circle, right? And then you have the ones that are just long and slender and go way out. So these trees that I have here are more like this. They're more the round shape instead of the long feather shape like fronds. So know what kind of palm you're doing and know what thing is, but they always have this part. And so then inside the frond is really nice and dark in here. And just worry about the outer edges being very thin and a lot of them. On this, usually on a palm tree that's more like a feather, there you don't see both sides like this. Mostly you see one side because they're hanging down, so you only see one side, and it's usually hanging down like this. Though you can sometimes see the other side too. It all depends on what the shape is. Is it in front, straight on, looking from the side? But usually they're hanging from the side like this downwards. And then what you can do is you can just darken the whole area here and just worry about the edges being very thin and a lot of them for the fronds. Alright, so this is the round circle, and this is kind of more of a round circle type. So that's what I'm going to do, and make sure that they're a little bit more rounded, and then fill in the inside a little bit more than the outside. The outside needs to be really fine and detailed, little brush strokes. Got to use your small, thin brush to do that. And since now this is kind of dry already, so I'm going to take black and maybe a little bit of red, and I'm just going to come right down here and just do the trunk of the tree. And as I'm doing this, I probably should do that later after I get that, because now I got to go around, so I should do the pier first. So why don't I do that? Let me do that first. Hold on, guys. But now I started this, I gotta do it, finish it. So, because I like once it's wet, you can throw a little bit of orange on the side where it's facing the sun. I can just throw that in there real quickly. And so let me finish this one up here real quickly. You know, that's one thing about this painting is it's kind of boring to watch because it's a lot of little details, and so it takes a little bit longer when it comes to the detail stage. Let's take a little bit of black here, a little bit of dark blue. You notice how I use black, but I also use color in my black. And again, just like a little fireworks. Just think of it coming out like these little fireworks coming out. And those are the stems for the branches, and then comes the fronds on top of those. And then look at the tree. Look at where it's filled in. Look at where the big part is shadowed. You know, get that in there first, and then do your fronds on part of that. So what I'll do is I'll take a little bit of other color. I never like having just one color. And then with the rigger, I'll go in real quickly and get the small detail fronds. And depending on your style, you may not be this detailed, and so maybe it is just a blop. And that's, you know, I've seen people be really loose with palm trees where it's just a couple little lines and stuff, and that's fine too. But then the rest of your painting has to follow. It has to be loose like the rest of the painting. You just can't have everything else detailed and then have your fronds look really, you know, not detailed. If it's really loose, like you're a loose painter, and then you do just a couple little brush strokes for these fronds, and that's fine if everything is the same kind of look. But you can't just all of a sudden make something look really loose when everything else is tight on your painting. Especially if you're hyper-realist, you make sure everything is super detailed, and don't, you know, you can't go away from that. You have to make sure that everything is hyper-realistic. It all depends on your style, but that has to be, that's the way it is. You can't have two different styles in a painting. It's either got to be loose or tight, or you can have some looseness in the area that's not the center of interest, and then tighten up in your center of interest. That's possible. So I'm going to do these fronds first only because I taught you that already, and then I'll go down here. How much time do I have? Oh, I still have plenty of time. So again, you know I'm working small stuff, but that's all I have left. I mean, I only have those things left. So I have to do these small little things. But like I said, I always like to do the big parts of these palms first, and then do the little edges afterwards, the little fronds. And you got to put a lot of them in there, again, because there's a lot in it. And I also like to float other colors in there. I don't like to just use the black by itself. I go back in after and do the big parts, get a little other color in there, and then do your little brush strokes. I mean, these brushes, these rigger brushes, make really skinny lines, and that's what you want. You want to make really skinny lines because these fronds are very small, very small, and you want to make all the little details. All right. So this is a little bit more orange right here too, and you can make a darker orange inside there too, because it's still going to be bright right there. But then as you go down, I can use my gloves here just to rub that a little bit. And again, make these fronds really orangey, but I'm going to make them still very small. Know what brush you want to use to make things small. Don't use a big huge brush if you need to make things really small. Make this a little bit darker right here. Look at how small I'm getting with some of these little fronds. But you need to do that. And then look at with the parts that are solid, and those parts I let other colors float in there. I want like the orange to float in there, and I want it to just look very wet in the wet like. And that's a good thing. That's what you want. That's why I'm teaching you how to do soft edges and hard edges, so that you have a little bit of both. So that it makes it look more like a watercolor. And that's what we're painting. We're painting watercolor. We're not painting a photograph. We're painting a watercolor. So I like to make it look like a watercolor. All right, let's go right into the darks, into the pier. And for that, I use ivory black. I'm just going to take solid ivory black. Just go in here, and then I first put it down, and then once it's wet, I plop some other colors in there. Which color do you think I'm going to plop in there? Orange, right? Because the sun's right here. So this side of there, look at that. Let's plop it right on top. Plop it right on top. Let it float. It can float right in there, right on top of there. It's like a wet wash, right? And you just flop it right on there. And so I make my dark colors with my black, and I find it does get kind of grayish, but that's okay. If you don't want really gray colors, then yes, you can mix your blacks. You can take your really dark colors like your alizarin crimson, your Prussian blue, and you can mix your blacks. That's fine, and they'll look very vibrant. But a lot of times I find that when students do this, they tend to make their blacks look way too colorful. Like it's like really bright, like alizarin crimson, or they don't take into account that they don't actually have black in there, and they don't make it look too much like black. They always want more color than something else. So there's a little more alizarin than there is phthalo blue or phthalo green, and so now I'm just putting in my long details, and once it's wet, again, I'm going to go over this tree, which I should have done that this first before I did this tree because it's over the top. So when I get to this area, I'm going to make it a little bit more orange. Oops. Right here, I make it a little bit more orange, a little bit lighter, because the sun is reflecting all that stuff there. Look how easy it is to pick up a black and then and this whole area right here in the picture is all dark. So this is just paint it all through there, and then definitely put some color into it. Float some color in there. You could add a little nice color, how about a nice dark blue in there? Oh yeah. It looks so neat when you put a color into black and then make it transparent by floating it into the water. It just really makes it dark, beautiful dark. And really dark too. That's what I like about it. It makes it more of a dark than if you would try to mix it, because students aren't good at mixing blacks. It ends up being too red, too blue, they don't get a true black anyways. They don't get a true super duper dark black. And when you want a dark black and you want it super dark, it really helps to have a solid black, like void of any color. I'm going to be asking some of my teachers, I know some of my teachers from thinking, what was their reasoning that we couldn't use black? I know it was I think because it wasn't colorful enough of black, or it was because black is not a color, but I'm going to find that out hopefully in a couple of next weeks when I see some of my old teachers from the American Academy of Art. So see, I'm just going in there, and then always don't forget though, and when you're putting the dark in there, don't forget to go and get your color though and put it in there. Let it float on top of the water, because that's what makes it look so beautiful, is having things float on top, and it still looks very transparent. But really, if you think about it, black is not very transparent, or any dark color is not transparent, because you're covering up the paper of white. And so if you float it though, you see a little bit of the you don't see the white, you just see the brightness of the pigment. So it is kind of transparent in that way, but really, if you think about it physically, it's covering up the white of the paper. And so really, it is not transparent. I've seen some really dark, I've done some really dark skies with phthalo blue and black, and oh my gosh, they just look so vibrant. And they look so transparent, and the fact that it's not that it's transparent, but it just looks like this beautiful wash of watercolor. And that's what you're doing in watercolor. It should look like a watercolor. And I like to make it look like watercolor washes. Now over here, this is all just dark. Use my bigger brush, maybe my 1/2-inch brush, 1/4-inch brush. Get some of this red in there. Come down out with it. And I don't have to do it wet into wet at first, because I get hard edges for the edges of the posts. And then throw some color on this side here a little bit. So Chad says, I think students just have a tendency to go crazy with the ivory and Mars black when they have them. That's actually a very good point. Thank you for saying that. Because yes, that is one another reason. I used to, when I was in class, I always tend to use, because I used a lot of browns, and so when I was going for a dark, I always go for my browns. And so you tend to, like, if that's your dark, you just go for a dark, and that shouldn't be it either. Definitely, that's a great point. Great point, Chad. That you you don't use the black for every dark that you do. And even when you have a color that you want to darken, don't use black to darken it. Use a little bit of its complement, and also a darker color of that. You know, like I have a dark blue and I have a light blue. So use a little bit more of the dark blue to make, you know, to make something else dark, or make that dark a dark blue. You know, so definitely that's a great point. Is that you don't want to use all black for everything that's dark. You know, and because there's a lot of color in nature, but there's also a lot of dark in nature too. So it's a little bit of both. So, but you know, as you notice, what I'm doing is I'm taking my dark and I'm making it colorful, so that I am using black, but it's a colorful black because I'm actually adding color to it. If that makes sense, I hope it does. I just find that I've had students that never get dark enough and they don't use enough pigment, and so I find by using black first and then going from that, they finally can get dark enough. And that's the biggest thing about wetting your, that's why I've been doing this thing these last 2 weeks, has been soft edges. You need a lot of paint. You need a lot of paint so that it becomes controllable. You can't control a tint of water, you know, a tint of color that's just really thinly washed. It's too hard to control that. And so instead, use a lot of pigment in a water that you can control. So now I'm going to go in here and just take this dark, my thing, and put a little bit of orange in there. And now bring this across and reflect this from here. This is a dark area over here. I'm going to leave this really dark so that it's just out of focus, so I don't have to know what that is, all that stuff. I just need to have it dark, and then I'm going to come through here, do some reflections. And then this beach is actually in my dark area. See on the picture right here? That's a little dark strip right there. So now I'll do that, and I'll get to my edge of my water. And then I don't want to make it too just black. I definitely want to put some orange in there. And so I don't have to use black for this part. I can go back to my orange and blue complements, making it gray. And so, you know, you don't want to use the black for everything. It's basically black you use for your darkest darks. Like if you want to have a really dark, that's you can use black for. And, you know, like I said, too, it's like you can use the dark colors, mix them, and I'd like to do that, too. Sometimes just take those colors, mix them together, you know, like your alizarin and your purples and blues. And you can, if you want to, like right now, I'm just making that more alizarin. You'll see how that's a little bit more alizarin dark. And then you get a little bit of dark blue, Prussian blue in there. So you can get a nice dark in that, colorful, too. But I just don't want you to feel like you never can use black, because those rules, I don't like when there's a lot of those rules I was given. I don't think the rules do artists who are trying to advance a little bit farther than a beginner. You have to break some rules. You have to know how to break the rules and then be able to make things work for you. Make things work because you know exactly what happens if you're using too much black or that. So now I'm going to go in here with a dark blue and do my little waves onto the water. So the wave has the one side that's darker, right? And so I'm just gonna, and then this has reflections from the pier into the water. There's a reflection, right? And so I'm gonna put that in there now. A little dark. Now in the photograph there is not much reflection. There's a little bit of dark in there, but I'm putting in a little bit more than is there because I know how to do it. I've done enough water and piers to know that a lot of times if the water is still more still, then you can see a little bit more of the image in the water. And so now, later on I can put the footprints and everything in the water and all that kind of stuff. But right now I'm just going to do the little waves. And waves come rolling in at about the same distance each time. Any questions? PBK9 is ivory, is not vegan. Is that matters to anyone? It's good to know. Carbon black is organic. Mars is iron oxide. I actually am going to be ordering all the blacks and I'm going to test them all out. I'm going to do a video on all the blacks because I want to see the difference. I don't know all the difference of all of them yet. And so I definitely want to get them all from Holbein and just give them all a shot. Give them all a try. So that's in order right now, and I'm going to be figuring that out because I want to know what they all do. What is it about each one that is? I don't know much about the scientific part of it, but I have to know the color of it and the value of it and the transparency of it. And so there's some waves. See, I got the waves in there now. Now I can go in here. No, see, that's still wet. So I got to go over here now. Do these. How much time do I have left? 10 minutes. All right, 10 minutes. Let's get these in here. So a little bit of dark green. So I'm gonna take my phthalo and my quinacridone gold. Makes it really dark green. But that green is way too vibrant for me. So I'm gonna dull it down with black because I need to have it really dark. And I'm gonna get the big parts first. The big areas that are just the big part of the enclosed fronds, and then I'll do the fronds afterwards, after I do the big parts of the whole leaf. Because first you get the whole leaf, the big part of the leaf that's kind of all together, and then you get the small fronds, because you can't do that. So what I see people doing, what I see my students doing, is doing each frond, and that's just, it's too much, and it doesn't look as good if you do each frond as you do the whole plant. Try to do the big parts of the plant first, so like this whole part of the plant, and then do the fronds afterwards, because that way you get the nice wet in the wet wash in there, and then do the little fronds afterwards, because then you can put them on side of the frond and make the frond look better. It just makes it look better. I tell you right now that you're not going to make a frond look really good if you do every single one, unless it's like hyperrealism again. Then you'd have to make each one, but then you're going to get the darks anyway, sooner or later. But most of my students that do that, they don't do every single frond, and they're way too big, the fronds anyways. Here we have light posts on here. There's going to be people on deck here onto the pier. These are little light poles. There's a little fence that goes along it. I can put that in there. Now, I know it in the picture it actually is white, this thing, and you could actually use white paint if you'd like. I don't mind. You can. That's one way of getting white back into your picture. Or I'm just not going to put it in as white. And there's the side of the post of the. This is a little bit of this. I can't get those in there yet. Let me get over here and get these fronds in here before it gets too dry. I want my fronds to start in wet and then go out and be really thin. And I want a lot of little ones. And really sharp. You know, you practice doing really sharp little lines. You don't want these big, huge lines that don't look, they look like a tree. No, these are just very small little fronds here. Look at that. Really small. And there's a lot of them, but don't do them all the way through to the stem. Do that, what I said before, do the big area of the dark, and then do the little edges. The edges have to look really nice here. And put a little, here I'll put a little post. Here I'll put little lines in there to just fake it a little bit here, what's going on over here. Here I'll put a really dark. Make it look like it's covered up. And again, if you want an area that looks like it's nothing, like there's nothing really happening there, then just make it soft edge and make it blurry. Make it look like it's just out of focus. And also I could scrape into here. I could scrape, because there's enough pigment, and it's that point where I could actually scrape in there. Here I'm going to get a little bit of texture in the actual tree here. It's in the front, so I might as well. Any questions? No, still ivory black. Yeah, I don't know the difference between Mars and ivory black. I just have ivory and peach black. Like I said, I am going to get all the blacks, and I am going to test them out, and I'll hopefully do a newsletter for that 1 week. Because since I am talking a lot about black lately, I might as well learn it myself, like what the difference between each one. So now I'm just putting this dark in here. I'm just putting the trunks. I didn't follow my line. That one goes a little bit farther. Oh well. And See how this is not really dark? It's a lot of color in there. I don't know if you can see that, but I don't know if you can see it's not really black. It's a lot of color in there. And that was when I put the alizarin in and I put it on top of the black. So there's a lot of black in here, but there's also a lot of color. So it still looks colorful, even though I'm using Mars, and I'm using ivory black and peach black. And we got 5 minutes. Any more questions, guys? Because we're almost done here, guys. So I'll put a few more little lines in here. And there was nothing to be done with masking fluid because everything was dark on top of light, right? The whole sky, all the water, that was all light, and then you just put the darks on it. So silhouette shapes are always good for that. You know, silhouette shapes, like we talked in the beginning. Yeah, use your silhouette shapes and learn how to do really dark darks, but make them colorful. And you don't worry about using black or not. And I can see how they make beginners not use black, like Chad had said, that a lot of times they make them not use black because they use it for everything that's dark. And then it kind of dulls everything down too, though. So now in the beach front here, why not put a little bit of, and definitely you want to put your name right over here. And actually this beach is not dark enough. You have to make it a little bit darker. And so I'm going to go in here, it's still a little wet, put a little bit dark. And then of course there's going to be footprints and stuff, so little dots and stuff. You can make footprints in there. Make it a little bit darker, and then we will be done. I probably should put a little flag up here or something. It'd be kind of nice to have a little flag here. And little light posts, a little railing you can put on there. Oh, people, little blobs for people. I forgot people real quickly. Just put little dabs. You don't have to try to make them like carrot stick people, where the bottom is thinner and the top is, you know, thicker. No heads or anything. It's too small for that. Just little dabs. Don't make them too big though, because they look like giants on your pier. You just want little dabs here and there. Or nobody. Maybe it's just one of those days where nobody's on the pier. Again, here a little bit darker. And these trees, bring them off the page. Don't stop and put them into the page. Bring them off the page. Very important not to put them on the front, because you want to have them go through and be in front. Like this is not where they're landed, they're way in front. I have seen you use Yupo before. If you do get a Mars black, or Daniel Smith calls it lunar black, on Yupo it's especially gratifying, causes it to push other pigments. Oh yeah, we just had a artist teach us that. What was his name? Oh, I forgot what his name was. He had used the lunar black, and the granulation was amazing on it. All right, there, guys. I think that's it. And also, if you guys ever use black and on my newsletter, not my newsletter, but my Facebook page, the Becker Art Group, you know, if you use a black and you want to tell us about it, please let us know. I would love to know. You know what happens when you use like lunar black, or let us know. I'd love to know that. Different companies have different pigments of certain things, and let us know. I use Holbein because I love Holbein, but that doesn't mean that you have to use everything, nothing but Holbein. You can use all different types of colors, and all right. And so there we have it, guys. There's our this one, and this is this afternoon's. And so here, look at the afternoons, it's a little bit lighter. Again, and like I said, I wanted to make it a little bit darker, which I did. Made a little bit more of the sun coming right down to the middle here. And then, like I said, when this is dry, I will sign it right here, very dark, because it'll weigh this part down a little bit. You could put people on the beach too. That'd be up to you, but draw them well though. If you're gonna draw them, draw them out. All right. So almost 9 or 7:30. Look at that, 1 hour exactly. Any more questions? And so now we've done 3 weeks of soft edges, wet into wet, and I really hope that you have done some of that. Try some of that. It is just really important to learn how to do soft edges, hard edges, and black and white is always good for darkening your pigment, making your pigment lighter. and being able to control it. Like you saw in my newsletter this week, how to control your light, your dark colors that you make light, because you can use more pigment. It's all about how much pigment you have, right? So next week we're going to maybe try some soft edges on an animal. So we may do a dog. We may paint a dog or a cat. We may do an animal with as fur. I know a couple of you did birds, and actually I know we had Mark who did a great bird. I mean, I love the fact that Mark was never doing soft edges, but boy, he just got these last 2 or 3 paintings. He did a lion, he did a bird, and he's really catching on with the soft wet in the wet. So I hope you guys catch on just as much as Mark did, and just keep on painting. All right? So until next week, until we maybe do an animal, we'll see you then.